Hello creatives, it's Michelle from Mondragon Photo and Design. The purpose of this video is to introduce a new kit of digital content and a few ideas of how it can be used. I often create content that represent the current season. This kit is all about the summer vibe. It's called Viridescent. Before I get started sharing ideas, I'll break down what's included. There are 4 sets of textures, which if you've been working with digital art for very long, you know can be used in a variety of ways. 2 sets are in the 2:3 ratio, the same as a 35mm camera. So if you crop in camera, they can easily be applied with no need to change the ratio. The other 2 are in the 1:1 square ratio, popular in scrapbooking. Both the 2:3 and the 1:1 can of course be altered to fit any format. The 5th part of the kit are the elements, containing 30 custom items that give your artwork a bit more dimension. There are also 2 free gifts. I'll talk about those more later. So here's a larger view of the content itself. You have the watercolor set, the bokeh set, the pattern paper set, another texture set that's a little bit less dense, and the elements. I'm going to put this on pause while I open up the sample files. Here's the first texture set, and we'll just walk through these to show you how they were constructed. Simple still life, shallow depth of field. The background is thrown out of focus. Add the watercolor texture. Soft light blend mode. Opacity is reduced a bit to 78. And then just brightened up overall a little bit. Second texture, decided to go a little bit bolder with the blend mode. Simple architecture shot. The second texture in set 1. This time the blend mode is on difference, and I chose it just because I thought it was rather bold and interesting. Don't forget to play around with all your different texture blend modes, because you just never know what you're going to come up with, and they will look different on each image. Third texture, simple landscape. Texture layered on top. This one is set on overlay at 100%. And then I wanted to tone down the green just a little bit, so I added a hue and saturation layer and lowered the saturation. And the fourth one, another still life. Simple shot. Last texture in that set. This time set on multiply at 100% opacity. The second set of textures are the bokeh. Bokeh can really come in handy on images where the lighting was a little flat to begin with, so it gives you a little bit more interest. On this one you can see it's a very shallow depth of field. Used a lens baby lens on my Canon on this one. So you can see that the background was really softened up a little bit. Added the first bokeh texture. A little bit too much green going on there, so again I added an adjustment layer and lowered the saturation. If you need to intensify the lighting a little bit, you can just add another bokeh texture. Texture 2, forest scene. Without the bokeh, it's a little bit flat lighting. It was an overcast day, deeper into the woods, so not a lot of light was coming through. And adding the bokeh just adds a little bit more interest. On this one, the bokeh was desaturated, but instead of using an adjustment layer, I went to Image, Adjustments, and desaturated it from here. The main difference between using it this way or using an adjustment layer is that with an adjustment layer you can dial back how much color you want to remove. Another landscape, kind of on the macro end. Lighting again was a little flat with the exception of the backlighting. Adding some bokeh brings in some interesting patterns. And then dialed back the green all the way on that one. Saturation was down to -99. And the last one, still life again, very shallow depth of field with that lens baby. which really obscures all the texture in the background. Adding a little bokeh not only adds some interesting lighting patterns to the background, but also on the cup. The third set of textures are the patterned papers. So I'll deconstruct this a little bit. There's the patterned papers. The quote was added by sandwiching it in between two copies of the patterned paper with a mask added to pop it out a little bit. The frame was added on top of the image itself. A mask was created to hide the excess of the image. And then some elements, all from the kit. A couple of butterflies and a couple of pieces of botanicals. Second one. Oops. The patterned paper. Some of the text that comes with the kit. That text was inverted and then put on light and blend mode with the opacity down to 25%. And then I just used a black brush on a mask to hide some of the text to make it look a little bit more worn. The image was applied on top and the rectangle frame on top of that, again with a mask on the image to hide the extra. And then a drop shadow was added to the frame to give it a little bit more dimension. Here we have the unusual shaped frame, one of them, starting with the texture on the bottom, the image on top with the mask to hide the excess image, altered the hue and saturation a little bit, added the frame on top with the drop shadow, and then added one of the flowers from the image, and this time the difference blend mode was used so that I could bring out some of the blues and the violets that were in the image itself. A duplicate of the flower was also added and tucked into this corner here. And then the last one in this set, that unusual round frame. So the texture itself, or the patterned paper, then the frame. So there's the picture, the one from the first set that we added the watercolor to. The frame itself with an additional mask so I could thin out this outer edge. The sheet music from the kit was added and then clipped to the frame. And it's easy to clip these things, and basically what you're doing, you're just taking one image and you're restricting it to the shape beneath there. So all you have to do is put your cursor between those two layers, and on a Mac you would hold down your Option key, on a PC you would hold down your Alt key, and that clips it to that shape. Duplicated the patterned paper, put it on top, poked a hole in it so that only the frame would show, added a copy of that sheet music to the overall image that is inverted and put on screen at 43%. And then here's a version of it with just that frame on top in black with a drop shadow. And the final set of textures. Here's the texture. Here's a copy of one of the stamps that come with the kit. It's been set to outer glow on the divide blend mode, and the opacity is down to 49%. This collection of frames are just 4 copies of the square frame that comes with it. The image is clipped to the shape of the frame so that it's not restricted, or that it is restricted rather. The frame on top with a drop shadow, a text box created by using the marquee tool and copying from the original layer, and a little quote inside there. The second one, the third or the second patterned paper, the panels are created from the second set of textures. Text from the kit, inverted and set to light and blend mode with the opacity reduced. Levels adjusted so that it looked a little bit more worn, and a butterfly on top. With this particular texture, I'm going to show you the stamps that come with the kit as a gift. So there's stamp number 4, stamp number 3, stamp number 2, and stamp number 1. On stamp number 1, you can see I added a bevel and emboss and drop shadow to give it a little bit more dimension. These stamps are done fairly large. And they're set up so that you can just stamp once and get the shape. You can alter these quite a bit if you would like. So for instance, on this one, I'm going to create a new layer on top so you can see what impact it's going to have. Over here under the brush settings, I can change the spacing so that when I click my mouse, I'll get more than one copy of that stamp. I'm going to reduce the size here a little bit. Under shape dynamics, I can change the size jitter so that different sizes will be produced. I can put it on scattering, which will make them more random. And under color dynamics, if I have some different colors set up for foreground and background and change the hue jitter, I could also play with the saturation and the brightness. So now when I click and drag my mouse, instead of just getting one shape, I'm getting multiple shapes in different colors and different brightnesses. Then I could also come over here and play with the blend mode to see what I get. So there are a variety of ways to play with that. You could also add a gradient to that. So if I command click directly on the thumbnail itself, it will select all of the shape, and I could grab my gradient tool, have a gradient that seems appropriate. For this particular shape, I'm choosing the radial option, and then I'm just going to click and drag to fill that with a gradient. So lots of different ways you can play with that and add some interest to your artwork. In the next one, we're starting off with that particular texture. I'm duplicating a little piece of it that is going to hold the frame in the picture. So the frame in this one is created from the texture itself. Added the photo in between, made another copy of this piece and just desaturated, and that's adding some interesting texture to the image itself. The frame on top with a mask to poke the hole through so that it's showing through to the image. And then just this rim of the frame was created by command clicking on this piece here, the smaller texture, creating a new layer, and then doing an edit stroke. And then the stroke color was chosen from these browns that are in the texture itself. And then I simply added a bevel and emboss and drop shadow to give it a little bit more dimension. On top of that, I added this cluster, And this cluster was created with everything that is in the Elements folder, but it is included as a free gift in the set, in the kit, already made. And then this final one is just a combo pulling something from each set of the collection. I did alter the colors a little bit of the green to go more towards the teal family, and then just played around with all the different elements. So as you can see, in a very short amount of time, I came up with lots of different ways that you can use this kit. Of course, there's lots of other combinations that you can do, combining all of them, and even more if you put this with everything you already have in your stash. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and if you're interested in purchasing this kit, there'll be a link down below. Thank you.